Hi, today I'm going to be talking to you about different steps of photosynthesis. So basically, first off, there's about 4 different steps involving photosynthesis that we reviewed in class. So first off, I'm going to be talking about light-dependent reactions. So light-dependent reactions are, as the name states, are reactions that require light, and then it produces oxygen, ATP, and NADPH in order to work. And in order to work, it needs ADP and NADP+. Try not to get those two mixed up. So first off, this begins in pigments in the second photosystem of the plant. So what this does is it absorbs light, and it's called the second photosystem because it was discovered after the first photosystem. So energy from light is absorbed by electrons in the photosystem, and it increases the energy level of these electrons, and it's passed down something called the electron transport chain. So chlorophyll is expected to run out of electrons, but it doesn't. It's because electrons are replaced by this in the thylakoid membrane. So this provides new electrons in the system, and it comes from water. So enzymes on the inner surface of the membrane are broken up by the water molecules in 2 different electrons. So first off, there's 2 H+ ions and 1 oxygen atom from this. Then 2 electrons replace the high energy electrons that chlorophyll lost due to the electron chain. And then after that, oxygen is released into the air as oxygen gas, or O2. 2 high H+ ions are released in the thylakoid membrane. So what happens after this is high energy electrons move through the electron transport chain from photosystem 2 to photosystem 1. During this time, the energy from the electrons is used by the molecules in the electron chain to transport H+ ions from the stroma part of the plant into the inner thylakoid. After this, pigments in the photosystem 1 use energy from light to reorganize all these electrons because it's all being absorbed into the plant. So NADP+ picks up these and it becomes NADPH, taking in all the electrons in the outer surface of the thylakoid membrane and also an H+ ion. So what happens next is H+ ions are released during the process of electron transport. There's positive charge from the inner thylakoid membrane and there's a negative charge from the outer that gives off energy to create ATP for the plant. After that, ATP synthase is what's responsible for allowing the H+ ions to cross the membrane. So basically, when ADP goes through the ATP synthase, it's basically converting it into ATP. And that's all for light-dependent reactions. Okay, so the second step of this 4-part photosynthesis video is called the Calvin cycle. So basically what the Calvin cycle does is it takes in the ATP and NADPH from the light-dependent reactions, which I just explained, to produce high-energy sugars. So what happens first is CO2 enters the cycle and begins it all. So it takes in 6 carbon dioxide molecules, which are combined with 6 5-carbon molecules to produce 12 free carbon molecules. So next after that is basically the energy input of the carbon cycle. So energy from ATP and electrons from NADPH are used to convert the 12 free carbon molecules into forms of higher energy. So after that, here comes in the role of the 6 carbon sugars. So basically 2 free carbon molecules are used to create a 6 carbon sugar, which is basically pretty much the main goal of this whole cycle. So after that, 5 carbon molecules are regenerated because it's taking in more CO2, and then basically the 10 remaining free carbon molecules are converted back into 6 5-carbon molecules of carbon dioxide to repeat this whole cycle over and over again, so photosynthesis can occur again. Okay, so next we're going to be talking about the 2 steps of cellular respiration. So basically, cellular respiration is a process that the plant does to release energy by breaking down the food molecules it takes in the presence of oxygen. So basically, this begins with reactions of glycolysis, and it's a process in which one molecule of glucose is broken in half and it producing two molecules of a free carbon compound. So then we move on to the second step, which is ATP production. So ATP production is when two molecules of ATP are used up. And basically this is not that great sounding so far, but after all this, it ends up with 4 ATP molecules produced. So it basically gains 2 new ATP molecules by losing 2. Isn't that great? So then we move on to NADH production. So basically, this reaction is required, and it needs 4 high energy electrons from the Kelvin cycle, and passes them to an electron carrier called NAD+. And its real name is too hard to pronounce for me, and I'd probably spend like 5 minutes trying to pronounce that, even with the name in front of me. So basically what this does is it helps pass energy from glucose to other pathways in the cell. So some problems that may occur in cellular respiration are when large amounts of ATP are formed from glycolysis, and this ATP production stops due to all the NAD plus molecules are filling up with all the electrons, so therefore the process can't continue on. Okay, so this last step, and also the second step of cellular respiration, is called the Krebs cycle, also known as the citric acid cycle because its first product is citric acid. So during the Krebs cycle, it's basically breaking down pyruvic acid into carbon dioxide because it's basically extracting energy through the whole cycle. So basically what the Krebs cycle is doing is it's taking in pyruvic acid produced by glycolysis, and it enters the mitochondria, the glycolysis, and a carbon is removed from the glycolysis and it forms CO2, and electrons are removed from NAD+, and it converts it into NADH. So coenzyme A joins the 2-carbon molecule, forming acetyl CoA, and acetyl CoA then adds the 2-carbon acetyl group to a 4-carbon compound, forming a citric acid. So the second step, which is also the last step of the Krebs cycle, is energy extraction. So basically, citric acid is broken down into a 5-carbon compound and then into a 4-carbon compound. And then basically 2 more CO2 molecules are released and electrons join NAD and FAD, forming NADH and FADH2. So, and also another ATP molecule is formed at this time. And then the whole products of this Krebs cycle is basically 4 NADHs, 1 FADH2s, and 1 molecule of ATP. And that's pretty much it.